In the grand halls of a luxurious mansion perched atop a serene hillside lived Eleanor Hastings, a self-made millionaire with success that spanned multiple industries. Despite her towering achievements, Eleanor was often lonely. Having dedicated her life to building an empire, she had missed out on genuine human relationships. One afternoon, her assistant, Henry, handed her a photograph. It wasn't of a new investment, but rather a puppy, a majestic German shepherd with sharp eyes and an undeniable intelligence. "Eleanor," Henry said, "this breeder says these dogs are loyal and protective. You've always wanted a companion." Initially hesitant, Eleanor finally agreed. The moment the pup, whom she named Shadow, entered her sprawling estate, something shifted. Shadow wasn't just a pet. He was sharp, sensitive, and had an uncanny ability to sense Eleanor's moods. He quickly became her shadow, following her everywhere. Over time, Shadow's presence filled the house with life. From guarding Eleanor during her morning runs to sitting patiently by her side during late-night business calls, Shadow proved he wasn't an ordinary dog. The staff even joked he was her guardian angel. Build up. As months passed, Eleanor began to feel a strange unease, one that she couldn't explain. Small things began to go wrong. Her alarm system malfunctioned, suspicious figures were seen near her estate, and the family safe was mysteriously unlocked one evening. While Eleanor brushed these incidents off, Shadow didn't. He began growling at seemingly empty hallways, his ears always alert. One night, Eleanor would discover just how right Shadow was. Eleanor Hastings felt her life had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm, thanks to Shadow. But in the past few weeks, Shadow had grown unusually restless. He paced around the mansion at night, staring into dark corners as if something, or someone, was there. One evening, Eleanor sat in her home office reviewing reports when Shadow let out a low growl. His fur bristled, and his ears snapped toward the window. Eleanor followed his gaze and froze. A faint silhouette moved near the garden hedge. Gripping her phone, Eleanor called the mansion security team. "I think someone's in the garden. Check the cameras." Moments later, the guards reported nothing unusual. But Eleanor couldn't shake off her unease. Shadow wouldn't stop growling. That night, for the first time, Eleanor double-checked every lock in the house. Shadow followed her, staying close to her side as if shielding her. A growing fear. The next morning, Eleanor awoke to an unsettling discovery. The kitchen door was slightly ajar. She knew she had locked it before bed. Shadow stood at the door, sniffing the frame, his tail stiff. Eleanor's heart raced. "Henry," she told her assistant later that day, "I want more security. Something's not right here." "Eleanor, you live in a fortress," Henry said, attempting to reassure her. "But I'll have the systems checked." That afternoon, Eleanor received a call from her alarm company. "Ms. Hastings, someone tried to disable your security system last night. But they failed." Her blood ran cold. Shadow knows best. Eleanor began noticing more odd occurrences. Her car keys weren't where she'd left them. Her favorite necklace disappeared for a day and reappeared mysteriously on her vanity. Through it all, Shadow remained alert, never leaving Eleanor's side. Then one fateful evening, Eleanor hosted a dinner party for a few close business partners. Shadow, usually calm around guests, began barking furiously at one of the waiters, a man Eleanor had never seen before. Shadow quiet. Eleanor scolded, embarrassed. The waiter quickly left the room, but Shadow wouldn't calm down. He ran to the door the waiter had exited through, scratching and growling as though trying to warn her. Eleanor brushed it off as odd behavior until later that night, the night of terror. Eleanor had just retired to bed when she heard it, a faint creak of the floorboards outside her room. She sat up, listening closely. Then came another sound, a soft click, like the unlocking of a door. Shadow, sleeping beside her bed, immediately sprang up. His ears twitched, and a low, menacing growl rumbled in his chest. Eleanor grabbed her phone and whispered, "Who's there?" But there was no response. Before she could call for help, the bedroom door began to open slowly. A figure in black stepped inside, holding something shiny, a knife. Eleanor's breath hitched, But Shadow acted before she could scream. With a snarl that echoed through the mansion, he launched himself at the intruder, knocking him to the ground. The knife clattered as the man fought to break free. Shadow bit down hard, refusing to let go. The mansion was in chaos. Eleanor's screams echoed as Shadow fought the intruder, teeth sinking into the man's arm. The masked figure groaned in pain, struggling to push the German shepherd off him, but Shadow was relentless. His growl sounded like thunder in the silent night. Eleanor fumbled for her phone, trembling. "Security? There's someone in my house," she screamed into the receiver. The intruder, desperate to escape, shoved Shadow away and bolted out of the room, leaving the knife behind. Shadow barked furiously, chasing after him, but the man disappeared through a side exit before security guards arrived. Eleanor sank to the floor, her heart racing. Shadow returned to her side, panting heavily. His fur bristled but his eyes calm, as if to say, "You're safe now." She wrapped her arms around him. "You saved my life," she whispered. A shocking revelation. The next day, the mansion was swarming with police and investigators. Eleanor sat in her study, Shadow curled at her feet, as Detective Morales questioned her. "Ms. Hastings, you said your dog attacked the man before he could hurt you." "That's remarkable," the detective said, eyeing Shadow. "He's more than just a dog," Eleanor replied, stroking Shadow's head. Hours later, the detective returned with chilling news. "We've identified the intruder," Morales said grimly. "He's connected to someone close to you, your assistant, Henry." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Henry? That's impossible. He's been with me for years." "We found text messages," Morales continued. "Henry hired this man to break into your home, disable the security," and he paused. "Take you out?" Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "But why? Why would Henry want to kill me?" Detective Morales handed her a folder. "Greed. Henry's been embezzling money from your company for years. You were about to discover it." Eleanor sank into her chair, stunned. Shadow sat up, sensing her distress. "If it weren't for him," she said, looking at Shadow with tears in her eyes, "I wouldn't be alive." The heroic German shepherd. News of Shadow's bravery spread like wildfire. Media outlets covered the story, hailing him as a hero. Headlines read, "German Shepherd saves Millionaire from deadly betrayal." "Hero dog foils murder plot and exposes criminal assistant." Eleanor decided to hold a press conference. Standing in her garden, with Shadow proudly sitting beside her, she addressed the reporters. "Shadow isn't just a pet," she said. "He's my protector, my family, and my hero. He saved my life in more ways than one." Cameras clicked as Shadow sat tall, his eyes gleaming with loyalty and pride. With Henry behind bars and the mansion secure once more, Eleanor found peace. Shadow remained her constant companion, guarding her day and night. The bond between them had deepened into something unbreakable. One evening, Eleanor sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. Shadow lay beside her, his head resting on her lap. "Who needs anyone else when I have you?" Eleanor said, smiling down at him. Shadow wagged his tail, as if understanding every word. For the first time in years, Eleanor no longer felt alone. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion that once felt like a fortress had transformed into a sanctuary for Eleanor and Shadow. Their bond grew stronger with every passing moment. Shadow had become not just her protector, but her confidant, a constant source of comfort. But one rainy evening, Eleanor received a phone call that sent a chill down her spine. "Miss Hastings," a familiar voice said. It was Detective Morales. "Henry may be in prison, but we've uncovered something disturbing. The man he hired had accomplices, and they're still out there. We believe they were after your wealth." Eleanor's heart sank. "Do you mean I'm still in danger?" "It's possible," Morales replied. "Stay vigilant. Your security team needs to be on high alert." Eleanor hung up, her hands shaking. Shadow sat up, sensing her fear. He placed his paw gently on her knee, his deep brown eyes staring into hers as if to say, "I've got you." A night of suspicion. That night, the storm outside was relentless. Thunder cracked across the sky, and rain lashed against the mansion's tall windows. Eleanor tried to sleep, but Shadow wouldn't settle. He paced the hallways, stopping occasionally to stare at the front door or one of the windows. "Shadow, what's wrong?" she whispered, following him into the living room. Suddenly, the power flickered and went out. The mansion was plunged into darkness. Eleanor's pulse quickened as her phone lit up with a message. "We're coming for what's ours." Before she could process the words, Shadow let out a deep, guttural growl. He raced to the window, barking furiously. Eleanor grabbed a flashlight and peeked outside. Through the rain-soaked glass, she saw them. Two shadowy figures moving across the lawn. The break-in. Eleanor ran to her security system's backup controls, but the panel was dead. Someone had tampered with it. Her hands shook as she dialed the police, but Shadow had other plans. He sprinted toward the front door, barking like never before. The door burst open, and two masked intruders stepped inside, weapons in hand. "Where's the money, lady?" one of them snarled. Eleanor froze, her back against the wall. But Shadow didn't hesitate. With a ferocious snarl, he lunged at the first man, knocking him to the ground. The second intruder swung at Shadow with a crowbar, but Shadow was too fast. He dodged the blow and clamped his jaws onto the man's arm, refusing to let go. Eleanor used the chaos to grab a heavy vase from the table and smashed it over the first intruder's head. He collapsed with a groan. The second man, bleeding and panicked, tried to escape, but Shadow chased him out into the storm, barking furiously until police sirens filled the air. The aftermath. Detective Morales arrived minutes later to find Eleanor sitting on the floor, cradling Shadow. The German Shepherd was soaked from the rain, his fur matted and muddy, but his tail wagged weakly as he looked up at her. "Ms. Hastings," Morales said, surveying the scene, "your dog just stopped a dangerous group of criminals." Again, Eleanor smiled through her tears. "He's not just a dog. He's a hero." Morales knelt down and scratched behind Shadow's ears. "You've got yourself a guardian angel, Ms. Hastings. Take good care of him. A hero's reward." News of Shadow's second heroic act spread even further. Videos of the drenched German Shepherd standing guard outside the mansion went viral, earning him the nickname Shadow the Guardian. People from around the world sent gifts, messages, and offers to reward the brave dog. Eleanor, however, knew exactly how to reward him. She set up a trust fund in Shadow's name to ensure he would always have the best care, no matter what. Sitting by the fireplace one quiet evening, Eleanor stroked Shadow's fur. "You saved my life twice, Shadow. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Shadow wagged his tail, resting his head on her lap. For him, being by her side was reward enough. Weeks passed, and Eleanor's life slowly returned to normal. The mansion, once a place of constant tension, now felt like a true home. The dark days of betrayal and danger had faded into the background, leaving only the gentle, reassuring presence of Shadow at her side. Eleanor often reflected on the strange, heartbreaking journey that had brought her here. The people she had trusted had betrayed her, but through it all, Shadow had remained her unwavering protector. She had begun to feel something more for Shadow, something deeper than mere gratitude. He was more than a dog. He was family. She thought back to the day she had first brought him home, how small and innocent he had been, and how, over time, he had grown into her protector and confidant. One morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of Shadow barking excitedly in the garden. She rubbed her eyes and glanced out of the window. There, standing at the gate, was an old friend, Detective Morales. "Detective, what are you doing here?" Eleanor asked, smiling as she opened the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt your morning, Ms. Hastings," he said, tipping his hat. "But I've got some good news." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. "What's the news?" "Well," Morales began, "we've traced the last of the criminal group back to their headquarters. They're being brought in for questioning as we speak. All the people involved in your near-death experience have been apprehended." Eleanor let out a sigh of relief, her shoulders slumping in exhaustion. "Finally, it's over." "It's over," Morales confirmed. "Thanks to your dog. He's not only a hero, but his bravery has led to the dismantling of an entire crime syndicate. There's even talk of a Medal of Honor for him." Eleanor beamed. "He deserves it." Shadow, as if on cue, trotted up to her and wagged his tail, as if he understood the significance of the moment. The medal ceremony. A few weeks later, Eleanor and Shadow found themselves in the grand hall of the local police station. Members of the press filled the room, and officers stood at attention as Eleanor walked up to the podium, Shadow proudly beside her. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chief of police began, "today we honor not a human, but a four-legged hero. Shadow, the German Shepherd, has saved the life of his owner, Eleanor Hastings, not once, but twice. His courage and loyalty to his family have earned him the highest honor we can give." The crowd erupted in applause as Eleanor carefully took the medal, a shining bronze plaque inscribed with Shadow's name, from the chief's hands. She knelt down and draped it around Shadow's neck, who stood tall and proud. "This," Eleanor said into the microphone, "is the least I can do to show my gratitude. Shadow isn't just a dog to me, he's my hero. My life would be nothing without him." Shadow barked happily, wagging his tail as the room filled with cheers. With the criminals now behind bars and her business thriving, Eleanor began to focus on a new chapter of her life. She decided to launch a foundation in Shadow's honor, aimed at training service dogs for other individuals in need of protection. She named it Shadow's Guardians, and soon it became a thriving nonprofit, helping families across the country. Through Shadow, Eleanor had found her true calling, helping others and giving back. But most importantly, she had found peace. Late one evening, Eleanor stood in the garden, watching the stars. Shadow lay at her feet, his head resting on her lap. "I never imagined this would be my life," she whispered, stroking his fur. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Shadow nuzzled her hand and sighed contentedly. The bond between them was unspoken, but it was the strongest connection either of them had ever known. As years passed, Shadow's legacy continued to grow. The world had seen him as a hero, but Eleanor knew the truth. Shadow had saved her not just from danger, but from a life of isolation and heartache. He had shown her the meaning of loyalty, love, and trust. One afternoon, as Eleanor looked out over her sprawling estate, she smiled at the sight of Shadow standing at her side. They had both come a long way from that fateful first meeting. Together, they had faced danger, betrayal, and heartache, but in the end, love had been their greatest triumph.